a good bargain. A good Erev Shabbos. Sicha, Parshas Lech Lecha, the second Sicha. So the Rebbe deals with a very big union that has a lot of implications in halacha, and it's discussed in many places, many ways. And that is the relationship between mitzvahs before Matan Torah and to the mitzvahs of after Matan Torah. And the point that the Rebbe stresses is why the abundance of discussion of the Avos before Matan Torah when it's really not relevant. To a certain degree, perhaps that's what Rashi is asking. Like it's our Haskell in the beginning of Parshas Bereishis, and the reason being because it's not relevant. Rashi really asks even but what is this all about? And the Rebbe quotes the Rambam in Pirush HaMishnayos, famous Rambam. And I'm not going to read it now. We'll read it, some of it a little later. That the Rambam basically says, we don't do mitzvahs because that's what Avraham Avinu did. We don't do mitzvahs because Yankov was told, we don't do mitzvahs because it's Eivam Achai is also the Nanoyach. None of that is relevant to us. We're doing the mitzvahs. I mean, that's what the Rambam seems to be saying. None of that is relevant to us. What's relevant to us is that the Eibishter told us to do it after Matan Torah. That's the Rambam in Pirush HaMishnayos. And to answer that, the Rebbe uses a Ramban. Ramban tells us that the reason there is such a discussion of everything that went on with the others is because it's all a message to us, because it's all going to be happening to us. In the words of the Medrash, Kol ma she'ira la'ovis simin laban. As we know, the general phrase is repeated, Maisa ovis and labanim, what happened to the ovis is a simin for the children. And that would explain why we are doing this. Okay. So let's go further. So the Rebbe takes that a step further. And that's good in the stories. It's a siman. The Rebbe says, taking it a step further. And based on the Biurim Chassidus, that the Torah mitzvahs of the Avos is a hachana and the Nesinas Kayach. It is a preparation and it energizes us to do Torah mitzvahs. And through this, Yidden are able to do mitzvahs. The fact that the others did what they did, that gives us the ability to do mitzvahs. So that's step one. Step two, the Rebbe says this is a lesson in our whole life, that in order for us to be able to get, now what's the difference in the others and us? What's the difference in the mitzvahs before Matan Torah and after Matan Torah? As we know, that before Matan Torah, you weren't able to accomplish certain things because there was a separation between spirituality and physicality. After Matan Torah, they changed the rules, and spirituality was able to permeate physicality. And since it's able to do that, so now that was the begin. So we learn from here that this is the way to do it. You can't just come to that new aveda of godly energy to bring spirituality together with physicality. You need to do that work yourself, and then you'll be able to do the get the rest done. In other words, that then you'll be able to bring the aveda of the spiritual world coming together with the physical. So it requires to become a vessel to be able to do that. So the same thing with Avodas Avos. In order to get to Matan Torah, which is this phenomenon which comes only from above, in order to be able to bring godliness into the world. And so you needed Avodas Avos, you needed true. They were limited in what they can accomplish because they didn't have Matan Torah. But what they did is everything humanly possible. Then you get what's godly possible. And that's the same story by us. The more we do, the more we're going to get in that godly realm of being able to bring godliness into the world, which is a godly act, but prefaced by human aveda, human work, so that we can bring it to that level. And there compares it to a very famous Maimer Azal, that a person should learn Torah mitzvahs, even though he's doing it for ulterior motives other than the pure motive that's necessary to learn Torah. Do it, and eventually you'll come to that, which means do your work. Do your work. Do your work as a human being. Then move up to the level of doing the work as what's necessary and what you're going to be able to get, and therefore doing a higher level. That's basically the point of that, but that goes into other things towards the end, but this is the main point. So I believe that if we take a deeper look into this Rambam, we'll see that really that's what the Rambam says. The Rambam holds. Not only says it, he says it, and you need to come on to such an approach to resolve other issues in the Rambam. And also, if we analyze what the Gemara says, we'll see. But in order to, I want to stop for a moment and first make a point about a point of interest. And what is it? There's a point of information that we need to know. And that is as follows. The Eibishter gave 7 mitzvahs to the world and gave us 613. Now, on the surface, based on what the Rambam is saying, the 7 mitzvahs and the 13 have nothing to do with each other. This is before Matan Torah. This was given to the world when we were part of the world. This whole swarm dealing with when did we stop being part of the world. But nevertheless, that concept, there's 7 and there's 613. Gemara Masechta Sanhedrin Daf Nun Tes tells us that any mitzvah that was said to the Bnei Noach, to the world, and was repeated in Sinai, so that was said to both. So the Gemara says, no, and we're going to go through a discussion. And then the Gemara says that if something was said to the Bnei Noach, and not repeated to the Jews. So Gemara says, no, that was only said to the Yidden and not to the Bnei Noach. So Gemara says, well, it doesn't fit the logic. It was said to Bnei Noach, not to the Jews. It should say that it's only to the Bnei Noach and not to the Jews. So Gemara says, I say it, that needs understanding. But we'll see the applications of this. Lecha mid'am, the Yisrael shari u'lenachrias. There is nothing that could be permissible to a Jew and forbidden to a guy. So in other words, if it were only to one of the two, and that would be the Bnei Noach, would be the world, the nations of the world, it wouldn't be possible. Jews can't be less stringent than the rest of the world. So the Gemara comes up, but there is a case. It's a case in Parshas Kiseitze where we go out to war and we come across a woman and that woman is captured. We have a right to offer, and give her the chance to convert and become integrated into the nation and be married to the person who captured her. It's a process called the Bifas Tayar. And if not, you got to send her away. So, and the Goyim don't have that. They don't have that ability. So Gemara comes up with an answer. That's not because we are less stringent. They just don't have the ability to capture. They don't have the right to capture anything. Go tell it to them, but that's the fact. Then the Gemara goes on to say, they only gave that right to those who won't use it. And then the Gemara goes out to say, what about, there's a din that a B'neich is chayiv for less than a pruta. If he steals an item that's less than the value of a pruta, he's also responsible. Whereas a Jew, less than a pruta doesn't have any value. Well, actually, because they don't have the ability to not care about something and say, it's not relevant to me. That's not chayiv to me. Okay, bottom line is, the Gemara basically sets a standard. The Jews have to be more stringent than anybody else. Taisus Esamedi Kashin is a machlekes if Aver Menachai, which is one of the 7 Bnei Noach mitzvahs, worldly dinim, worldly mitzvahs, is a machlekes whether it applies to a non-kosher animal. And the Gemara says that machlekes is only by a Jew, but by a guy, of course, because to them, Torah, Tzameh. So they says, why don't we say the same story? How could a Jew be more stringent? How could a guy be more stringent than a Jew? There's an answer given. Dice wants to say that it doesn't matter because to the Jew it's also for other reasons. It's also because it's not kosher. But the bottom line is no Ever Menachai. That's what the Tashbitz asks on Tesis. It's not Ever Menachai. Who cares? It's kosher. Okay. So and then the question. Now let's go back to this Rambam, and I want to read the Rambam partially. Not every word, but some of the points he makes. So the Rambam says, "V'sim libcho." This is in Chulin Perek Zayin Mishnah. V'sim libcho liklal hagodol hazeh hamuva b'Mishnah zu. Hu amra misinai ne'asar. That these things became also from Sinai. So he says you have to know that everything we are careful about, or we don't do it because only because Hashem commanded Moshe. Not because he told anybody else before him. And he gives examples. The reason we don't need Eivim and Achai is nothing to do with why the Goyim don't eat Eivim and Achai. It's because Moshe told us not to eat Eivim and Achai. The reason we do Bris Milah is not because Avraham, but the Eibishter told us to do it like Avraham did. So, and the same thing with Gid HaNoshe. We don't do it because Yankim, because Moshe did. And that's why, and he brings a Gemara in Masechtas Makkos, a famous Gemara, that 613 mitzvahs were given to Moshe at Sinai. 613 mitzvahs were given to Moshe at Sinai. If you'll tell me that some of them were spelled differently, were said before, then it's not 613. Okay, so we see clearly that the mitzvahs that he didn't have in the Goyim, it's not the same league. That's one issue. Why do we? Why is we're in a different world? And we'll see it. We'll take it further. There's a question asked. What would be? It's not a question, but according to this, it's obvious. If a guy who was already required to do certain mitzvahs becomes a Jew, wants to convert, Allah is you have to accept all the mitzvahs. Okay. Accepting the mitzvahs, I'll accept all the mitzvahs that are new to me. The old ones I don't have to accept. I have to accept I'm not doing it anyhow. I'm not allowed to do it. I wasn't allowed to do it before. And he's going to say, I'm only doing this. Is there any thought that would be sufficient? Of course not, according to this Rambam, right? So I don't care what you do. I don't care. Why are we dependent on the guy? What does it have to do? Why are we even comparing? Compare and contrast. Why are we comparing mitzvahs? We can't be more common than that. We have a different thing. So the answer is we do mitzvahs from a different level. It's holiness. It's a different level of mitzvahs. Why is it relevant? That's one issue. It's not an issue that you can't get past, but an issue that's worthwhile to get past. But the issue becomes much more serious upon examination of the Rambam and Hilchos Melachim. And that's where we have to analyze based on what the Rebbe says also. Now, this we have to read, at least partially. The Rambam first lists that Adam Harishon was given 6 mitzvahs. Avodah Zarah, not allowed to worship idols. Berachas Hashem, not allowed to curse God. Al Shvichas Dam, not allowed to kill. Gil Arayis, immorality. Gazel, stealing. Dinim, that there must be justice. Has to be a system of justice. So the Rambam makes a statement, interesting statement. Even though we know it's all from Moshe Rabbeinu, but that's not to learn, and they're logical. It's stop. It's all part of Torah. So that's only 6. Where do we get 7? Noach got a 6th, a 7th. So that's 7 mitzvahs. Now listen to this. This is the way the world went till Avram. But Avram and Avram added another mitzvah. Now here, I'm not going to get into this, but this is like, who is swallow shachris? And he davened shachris. The Yitzchak, he fresh meiser. Yitzchak added the idea of giving meiser. And he added a davening to the afternoon as the day winds down. This is all interesting wording. I'm not. We can sit on this, and I have sat on it and have written about it. It's very, very, very interesting. And the Yankiv Esav Yidanoshe. Yankiv had another mitzvah. So by now, and this Larvis and Yidav Meir. So by now, leaving out the davenings, we are up to 10 mitzvahs. Oh, the Mitzrayim, that's Tava Amram, the mitzvahs he says. Mitzrayim, Amram got more mitzvahs. As we know, tomorrow they were given Shabbos and other mitzvahs. Ad Sheba Moshe Rabbeinu v'nishlema Torah al yodai till Moshe Rabbeinu came and the Torah was finished through him. Binyomin. How in the world does this fit with what he wrote in the Perlstein Mishnayos? Now you could say that the Rambam in Perlstein Mishnayos, the Rambam in Sefer Yad HaKazaka, in Hilchos Malach, which is in Hilchos Malachim is part of, is not responsible to each other. You know, one is a biur in the Mishnah, one is the halacha. First of all, we see that that's not the understanding as the Rebbe brings out. And this is not just a difference in a pshat. This is a basic, you say there's a difference and it changes the whole world. So what's going on here? What is happening here? So I think what we see in this Sicha is exactly what the Rambam is telling us. There is no question that what he writes in Perlstein Mishnayos is his view of what goes on. That's the facts. You know, that's the theological fact. In Hilchos Malachim, he is giving us the build-up. And the reason is because it's relevant. It's relevant. And the country, this is exactly what the Sicha is saying, that it's relevant. That is, that Hilchos Malachim is telling us how the mitzvahs developed, so to speak, through the history, and how, but end result, it's irrelevant. Why do we do the mitzvah? Is because Moshe now created a Torah through the Eivishter. Eivishter gave Moshe a Torah, and the Torah is what gives us the mitzvahs. Not because this is what happened in the year so-and-so, and this is what happened in this year, and this is what we were. This is Moshe Rabbeinu's mitzvahs. It could be this is the wording that the Rambam is using when he says "V'nishlam Torah." That's now Torah. Torah now becomes a whole different thing. Now it's Torah. Even in the Sefer Yad HaKazak, that's what he means. Now, if we go back and read what he says in Perlstein Mishnayos and look at this wording, you will see he says it there too. The Rambam writes, "Ein einu eichlin ever menachai leimipnei Hashem osar b'nei noyach ever menachai." We don't eat it because the angel told the world don't eat ever menachai. Ella mipnei shemoisha osar aleinu ever menachai meshen stava b'sinai sheyishar ever menachai osur. Moshe didn't told us keep that isser now. In other words, that isser continues. Now as Torah. The next line. We don't do it because historically it's a beautiful thing. Avraham Avinu. The Eivishter told us to do Mila K'Moshe Mal Avraham all of a. He told us do what Avraham did. And we do it now because Moshe told us to do what Avraham did. So the Rambam in Perlstein Mishnayos is stressing that it is a continuation with a new twist. It's a continuation, meaning it's not, it is that mitzvah now on the level of Torah. Forget, it's not, is that it? We don't do it because of that, we do it only because, no, we do it because they said do this the way he did it. Yes, continue that, but now we're doing it not because he did it, because the Eivisha taught. If that's the case, it's clear. You can't come and tell me that the Yidden, who are the completion of the Torah, taking all that and entering it into a higher level, are less than them. No, they can be less. They can be different because we are different type of people. We can do kibush. To us, a kosher, to a guy, a kosher and non-kosher animals all the same. So therefore, they can be even achai. To us, it's two worlds. Why would there be even achai? We're not less. We just have different animals in the world than they do. By them, all animals are equal. All animals are created equal, and by us, it's not. They're different animals, different levels. And therefore, it makes sense because it is a continuum, but it's a continuum that boom jumps up into a whole new level. That's what it's about, and that's what I'm saying there. And now, when you add to that, why do we need a continuum? Why can't we just say simple? Why did the Rambam have to do that? So that is the Rebbe's word. That you know what this is all about? Because this is necessary to get to that. You can't get to that level of kedusha and bringing godliness into the world without the avedas atzmi, the avedas that you do on your own. A ger, if he comes along and he says, "I want to do mitzvahs the way I did them before, and I'll continue those," but I'm not taking them on as you're not taking the Torah. The Torah is the Torah. You don't take Torah. You don't take Torah. That I think is the beauty of the word of the Rebbe. It's not just it is the process. This is the process. In other words, what we have here is the facts. When you add the philosophical point and the Chassidus angle that the Rebbe puts in, it just enhances that whole piece of understanding. I want to bring out and end with an interesting discussion that's brought down in the Perlstein. Regarding a child, based on what we just spoke. And Sheva Mitzvahs Bnei Lech. Some Sefer in a tshuva was asked, based on the Rambam writes that a kotten, a benayach can be punished. In other words, there's no tour of 13 years old. But that question is, the Rambam also writes that the idea of shiurim were given only to Yidden. And the Rosh and the Tshuva writes that this idea of 13 years old, 12 years old for a girl, 13 for a boy, all those are shiurim. So he writes that why can't a katan, I'm sorry, a katan doesn't get punished, right? How come he shouldn't get punished? There's no shiurim to benayach. Sorry, Ram writes a katan does not get punished. So why shouldn't he get punished? There's no shiurim. That was the question. Again, Rambam shit is that a katan benayach doesn't get punished. But the shiurim are not for benayach, so why does he not get punished? So the Chassam Sefer answers the tshuva that you're right. There's no shiur of a katan 13 by a benayach. But it depends on his intellectual ability. We had analyzed. If he's a child that doesn't have responsibility, that you see in him that he can't have responsibility, that means he didn't come to the idea of das, of maturity to the point that he can be responsible, then he's pot. It can be he's pot at 14, nothing to do with age. But at least he's not pot at 30. It's not to do with 30. Yeah, definitely not going to punish a child of 2 years old that he breaks something. He doesn't know what he's doing. But if he's a child that's developed and he's mature enough and he does something, then my yid doesn't matter. He can be mature, he's that age. And you need certain other assets. You need a certain physical maturity. And by Benayach, you don't have that. That's what the Chassam Sefer baskets. So Achrayim will come along and say, just said before, that a yid can't be less than a goy. So they want to be mechadash pella, that a Jew, a Jew in the a child, a Jewish child, in the 7 laws that are applicable to Noach, to the world, will have the same din. Will have the same din as a goyish child. And therefore he will be chayiv in all those mitzvahs. So like a benayach before he is 13, if he's mature. Now, okay, he won't get punished, but the chiyuv is there. So in other words, if a child steals, he was over allowed. But the answer is 2 things. First of all, it's a double-edged sword. Because if a benayach turns 14, 13, and 14, and he's not a bendas, he's not going to be chayiv. A Yisrael turns 14, and he's not mature. It doesn't matter, he's going to be chayiv. So, hey, that takes it away. Second, the idea that you can't be Lecha midam that a Jew has that a goy doesn't have. I mean, a goy has that a Jew doesn't have. That's in the mitzvah. You can't have a mitzvah that's that graduated to the level of kedusha, and as we explained before, the mitzvah went from being a mitzvah to part of Torah to a whole new level, and say that this mitzvah now doesn't apply to this mitzvah, the Yidden will have less stringent chiyuvim. This has nothing to do with the mitzvah. This has to do with what? With a shear of the person in his life. It has nothing to do with the mitzvah. In other words, the way we understand it, it's that the mitzvah has to have a continuum. The mitzvah has a continuum. By this person at this age, because he's not in the league of the mitzvah. What does it do with the mitzvah? So therefore, it doesn't really apply to what we're saying, and therefore, but it's just a very interesting. I thought it's interesting to bring into our discussion so we understand the idea behind it. Anyway, Lecha Rabbi, and I want to commend all those who are involved in the project, and I want to commend all those who are learning the project, because there is no greater form to kusha to the Rebbe than through his Torah and through his learning. Thank you very much. Sei gesund und stark.